As if locking your bits wasn't enough, now we're going to lock your apps. Hi guys, and welcome to the show. I'm actually back at NASA at the Marshall Space Flight Center, and today our guest is Paul Bergson. Paul, say hello.
Hi, how's things going, Lex?
Pretty good, man. Where are you located?
I am in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I
Yeah,
actually live in Egan, but
yeah. So I thought so. The Viking shirt kind of gave it away.
yeah, you guys, you took it to us, but there's plenty more years to come.
Yeah, I'm a Dolphin fan, but I live in Charlotte, and my wife's a huge Panthers fan. So it's kind of a house divided a little bit. But we
Yeah,
make
I'm
it
from
work.
Wisconsin, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. So you're going to talk to us about AppLocker today.
Yeah, AppLocker's been around for a while, and it hasn't been getting a lot of action, and people are starting to recognize and notice that there's value in it. And so I wanted to try to get the word out to folks, and I think this could help. So.
So I think it's a great topic. I have to admit, like most people, I probably don't know near enough about AppLocker. So today I think we're going to rely on you and your expertise.
Okay, yeah, it's just a starting point. I'm not going to show you how to configure anything, but the information should help you get going, and there's plenty of information out there to help.
Okay, so let's kick things off with a brief description of what AppLocker is.
Okay, well, in years past, people probably have heard the term whitelisting, and when they have, it's more been around DNS. Folks can visit only certain web pages. So like if you work for a certain enterprise, they may not want you to only go to certain sites. So what they can do is they can put down, hey, here's a site you can go to. Try to go something else, it just drops in a black hole. That same type of theory is built into Microsoft's AppLocker, so that we can define which files, folders, scripts that you can run, and anything outside of that is blocked. So that reason is starting to come more into play is that we've got a lot of malware issues going on, and this can really help users. Large companies, you wouldn't roll it out to all 100,000, but you could roll it out over time. There's a certain, like anything, a lot of planning involved.
So it sounds like it's a way for us to define the applications that people that are in an enterprise can actually execute and run.
Yeah. So think of it like this is what you're approved to use, and that's basically what it is. I mean, when you go to work, some enterprises, they only want you to use the applications that have been defined for you to use. Anything outside of that can disrupt, you can cause drift, things like that, where you're going to impact your, you could damage things. I mean, you'd start creating help desk calls, things like that. So this should help with that type of scenario.
Awesome. Let's take a look at the presentation, Paul.
Okay, so I threw together some slides that maybe can help a little bit, and I even got a demo in there. So now we kind of explained a little as to what AppLocker is. People might say, why do I need it? There's plenty of different scenarios that, I'll call some of them out, but in the end, it's going to all, again, kind of boil down to control of the use of what you should or shouldn't be allowed to use. So think about in an enterprise, as an admin, you've got to maintain software. If for some reason someone is running an application and vendor releases a new version, that's great, but there's costs associated with that, and there's training associated with that. So if someone likes the software, goes ahead and installs it, maybe you've only had a trial version. This here, with AppLocker, we can control versioning. So now, even if someone has pushed out a new version you can control this so that only the version of software that you approve can be run. So with that, as I had touched previously, if you roll out new software, maybe everything still works, but you haven't been trained on it. So all of a sudden, people are starting to get confused on what to do. Maybe they start making mistakes. It can increase the help desk traffic. So there's a lot of different issues here that we can help. And along with that, if for say somebody does update this, doesn't do it properly, doesn't do something in the back end, you could create file corruption. So here's again another good reason to help with that. And part of being an admin is you need to try to keep things as locked in as possible. And one of the ways to do that is to prevent image drift. There's been a lot of talk with that recently, with tools such as desired state configuration. And this is one of the tools that could help, not as far as the drift itself, but if someone changes something and your users will no longer be allowed to run that without approval from the administrator that manages the desktop through AppLocker. But the big thing that I think is the important piece here that I'm really wanting to talk about is the prevention of malware execution. So AppLocker, by default, is only going to allow you to run what you're saying that you can run. So if malware gets on the system, it can create problems. So even if a user might have the abilities from an NTFS permission to save their data, that doesn't necessarily mean that they can execute it. And the reason I say that is if you apply your AppLocker correctly, then you're going to be able to control that, which is a big step forward. So a lot of folks hear about systems being infected, but there's still a lot of confusion. So one of the things people have to start to think about is, and I believe from other Taste of Premieres that I've watched, Lex, you've had Kurt Faldy on here, Jessica Payne, a couple of the folks that I've worked with. They've done a really good explanation of a lot of the different infections. And one of the things that's been brought up a lot is Flash and out-of-date Java. Those are two big things that create a lot of problems. So there is a third piece as well, which everybody is well aware of. You can go in, you can open an email message which seems harmless enough, but it may have unintended results which somebody who may have been socially engineered into thinking this is coming from one person and it's really coming from another. And because of that, I'd like to give you a little demo if I could. Okay, so what I'd like to show you, Lex, is I've got here a small domain, and in this instance I've got a Windows 7 device, and just think of it as a user comes in for the day, they're doing their daily work, and they'll bring up their Office or their Outlook app, and in this instance you can see this is just a demo. I've got a Excel spreadsheet that was sent to me by someone internally, or so I think. So I'll double click on that and I'll bring up my Excel document. Well, they're asking me to look through it, so it's telling me right now, it's saying protected view, which is like, hey, I trust this user. And so I start reading through it, and it's kind of garbagey. Do you kind of see what I mean? It's kind of nonsensical.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the old enable macros trick.
Yeah. So, just thinking, no big deal. I'm going to enable macros. This is from the VP or something like that. I got to make sure I don't want to delay him. So I quickly enable it, and boom. It's like, wow, you got things going on and you don't know what's happening. And even though this seems simple, and you're well aware, I think, of this scenario, there's a lot of different things going on in the background. And I sped things up, obviously. Normally you would click on it, you would know what was happening. But eventually you would get a screen like this showing that you've just been compromised.
Yeah, not fun.
Right, and so what we can do here is I'd like to show you a little bit of what AppLocker is capable of doing, and then we'll come back here and we'll go through the same scenario with the AppLocker enabled. Okay, so back to the slides for a minute, Lex. I'd like to kind of walk through a little bit of AppLocker. And when I've been putting a lot of effort in this, and one of the things that I've had a lot of contact with different individuals, both internally and externally. And one of the things folks have asked me is, well, this is great. I can, I don't have to have my antivirus running anymore. Maybe I can remove my NTFS permissions. And it's like, whoa, this does not replace your antivirus. This is part of a defense in depth strategy. We've got several different layers. And like I mentioned previously, we've got NTFS permissions that also come into play. We've got other tools which, like I mentioned recently, I know you spoke with Jessica on Pop Slam or the Laps and Slam.
Yeah.
Kurt Faldy had come in and given a talk about Emmet. And, Emmet's got the internal memory type protection. So these are all pieces in place. So to give you a little example, I want to bring up here a slide that kind of explains when you build a default Windows image. If you think about it, you'll have your C drive, the root here, which I've shown here as C, and then a couple of the different folders I've given you is the Windows folder, and also below that then the users folder. So obviously there's more folders than these, but these are just a couple I want to call out. So if we go below Windows, there's a folder called temp. All authenticated users have read-write permissions within that folder. So I've highlighted that in red. And then under C drive again, you've got the users folder. So each user that logs into this machine will be given a workspace area. And so under that workspace area, the authenticated user A, has read-write permissions again to this one, and user B, and only user B, has read-write permissions to this one. And like I said, remember up above here, this read-write is handed to everyone.
Yeah.
So now what AppLocker wants to do is not change your NTFS permissions. So if you've got an application that needs to have a write space so that it can and make changes, that's all good and fine. But Windows was never meant to have applications installed in temporary locations or user locations. That's for the storage and the use of applications. So if you think about it, if we go ahead and enable AppLocker, these folders are available, but now as you can see, the execution is no longer available. So malware will still be able to copy their data to these locations, but AppLocker is going to prevent you from executing on it.
So hang on a second. Are we saying that AppLocker is going to prevent us totally from running these applications, or is it only going to prevent us from running these applications, if they reside in these folders? So
what AppLocker is going to do is give the administrator the ability to prevent executables and like .exe, .com, scripts, DLLs if you want. It's going to allow the administrator to state what can and can't be run in a specific location. Does that make sense?
It does. So we're saying, so this application can be run, but not if it resides in these folders.
Correct. And it doesn't matter. I can copy whatever I wanted out there. It could be a legitimate app. So if I've got an application, and you'll see here in a bit, we talk about Windows. I mean, you need to run all your applications with Windows and program files. But within program files, if I install an application that I want Susie from HR to run, but I don't want Joe from engineering to run, I can control it so that Susie is allowed to run it, but when Joe tries to run it, he's not been given the execute permissions for it, and he'll be denied that, even if it's in a location that was initially destined for others to be run. So it really is a really useful tool to control applications besides malware if need be. So one of the questions that'll come across to people, now if you think we're being Microsoft and closing out our year end, so people kind of look and says, hey, this is really great, but the big but is how much does it cost? And that value, that expense value right there, I think fits into most people's budgets. But there is one catch, and that is it only runs on certain editions. So prior to AppLocker, there was software restriction policies that were available, but that wasn't used. AppLocker's got some new features built into it, and it does things a little better. And this one isn't really the location. Didn't really want to get into that, but starting with Windows 7 Ultimate and Windows 7 Enterprise, you can now run this. It's built in, so there's nothing you have to do. The administrator doesn't have to roll anything out or install anything. He's just got to start a service. So the one key here is, and this should be even if you weren't running AppLocker, you don't want your users to be local administrators. No matter what you're doing, legacy apps, there's some issues. I understand and I realize that, but to get a good secure system, never allow an administrator, never allow a user to be a local administrator. And the reason that is AppLocker is run by a service. So you cannot secure anything on no matter what it is. If you got a local admin as a user, you can't secure that host.
Right.
So the one caveat here, I guess I didn't mention that AppLocker is available in all versions of Windows Server since 2008 R2, with the exception of Windows Web Server and Windows Server R2 Foundation and Server Core. So those are a couple, but I don't think you're going to find a real lot of use for those anyway. Perhaps Core, I know I actually have a customer that wanted to run it on Core, but it wasn't available.
Cool.
So moving a little further, some folks are going to ask, does it work in a domain? Yes. And as a matter of fact, it's got a single pane of glass to manage. And I can show you that real briefly, real quickly. So it does a really good job there, as well as it works standalone. So if I've got a bunch of devices that, someone doesn't want to put into a domain, they don't want to run any risks, you can still manage this. And there's three main management tools. You've got your group policy management console, and if you want to do it locally, you've got your secure POL, or local security policy, and then the ever popular PowerShell. So PowerShell's got a number of commandments. I believe there's 5. And for what you need to do, those 5 are more than adequate. They do everything you need. They do it great. It can read your event log as this pushes out events into the system. The commandlets can actually read the event log and change for you. It's not going to do it automatically, but it can give you back actually the rules that you need from the PowerShell commandlets. It's really slick. So,
hey, hang on just a second, Paul.
Yep.
So is there a way later on that you could actually show us just a little bit about where you define kind of how it is that AppLocker
sure, I'd love to.
Does its thing? Yep. Okay, great.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, so now that we've kind of touched base on this, you did give me a good lead in. So AppLocker has support of a lot of different agencies besides our own. Governments are putting out information on that. We've got it from the NSA. United Kingdom's got the CESG, Australia's Department of Defense, New Zealand's NCSC. Yeah, I don't know what the acronyms stand for, but people in those nations, I'm sure, understand. And there's many others.
I think it's National Council for Security Council.
Okay.
I'm joking.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of good information out there. Microsoft put out a design guide. It's called the Torkington. It's written by a gentleman by the name of Nick Torkington. He's a security dude. I couldn't give you his exact title. I don't know it, but it's a really thought out, well laid out document. And there, a little plug, I don't know, I've been working with the team on a upcoming new release called Pop AppLocker. So we can come in and assist, provide a proof of concept, some knowledge transfer, and help to get you going. And with that, we help you with the monitoring through event logs, which I think Kurt had brought up when he did his Pop Emmet. And Kurt's got a really great wiki out there on Windows event forwarding. So if folks want to take a peek at some of that, that's all out there. And like I say, going through any of these here design guides are great, and they'll walk you through everything. So like anything, people kind of wonder, well, how good is it? Is it foolproof? Well, like anything, it doesn't matter what it is. There's extremely brilliant individuals who design these tools, and then on the other side, there's brilliant individuals who want to try to find ways around them because they want to steal stuff, basically your intellectual property or your money through other means. So we have recently had, I can't think of the word, where there was a break into how people can get around AppLocker. But someone said to me, well, then why even bother rolling AppLocker out if there's a break in it? And well, it's like antivirus, they're constantly updating. You know how you get these signature files constantly? I mean, that would be like, oh, somebody knows how to break through my firewall. I'm going to turn my firewall off. So there is a workaround, but it's easily fixed if you are also running Emmet. So Emmet can load what's called a shim, and this issue was part of the Reg Serve 32, and there's plenty of documentation out there that covers how to prevent that. And like AppLocker, Emmet is free. There's plenty of information out there, and you can even get a good look at it. Like I'd mentioned earlier, you would work with Kurt on Pop Emmet. So I think I previously mentioned.
Yeah, so I think the point, hang on.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I think the point that you're trying to make is that it's a piece of the puzzle. It's not definitive. It's not the definitive protection entity. It's just a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, yep. Totally.
It gets us there when implemented along with other tools like Emmet, etc.
Right. Yeah. There's not one tool. No matter where you go or who you go to, you're not going to find one tool. It's a whole range of tools. I mean, it's not just on the desktop. I mean, it's on the network. It's on storage. It's just a whole range of things you have to protect.
Absolutely.
So, like I said, I touched this briefly. Microsoft's got a range of event IDs to help you when you're using your event forwarding, like I discussed earlier. Those are all built in. They've got their own event logs, so you can go in and look at them. And again, this is all called out and defined in some of those previous links that I provided. So I'd like to try and go back. I'd showed you that demonstration earlier. So I'd like to go back and run that same test again, but this time I'd like to install AppLocker. So, and that way, when I'm doing that, I could also give you a brief demo of where the tool is. All right, Lex, so I want to hop back over to my demo. And okay. In the back here, I've got my domain controller, so I'm going to jump into that one first and just give you a real quick brief showing. So looking at the slide here, this is my domain.
By the way, I just need to point out you misspelled Vikings. It should be DOLPHINS.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're old enough to probably remember the Vikings losing to the Dolphins in the Super Bowl a number of years back. Maybe not. Maybe I just sorry. Anyway, so I've got here where my demo server is. I've actually got it under workstations, which is where, because it's a Windows 7 workstation. And if you remember, I talked about the service. So one of the things I do is I ensure that the service is run. Actually, we'll just show you that. We don't need to go into group policy to do that. So we have a service running. Application identity startup mode is automatic. And all that's doing is ensuring that the service is running and that the user can't change the starting mode. That will ensure that it's running. So now let's go back, and I don't know if you remember, I had spoken that the NSA had some rules defined in how to prevent malware from being executed or just locking this machine down. So I've taken some of those rules and I've built myself a policy. So let me show you. I'm going to go into Group Policy Editor, and if folks aren't familiar with it, there are great guides out there on group policy. And I just don't think this would be the time. It could be a while. So I'm going to drill down to where the application identity group policies are kept. So that's going to be within the security settings, and there's actually a folder here that sorry, I got to move a little bit and find I've got a couple things in the way. I can't see that. Let me just move actually I can move my window. Okay, so here's AppLocker, and we've got the rule set here, and from here, which is when I had spoken earlier, one of the things I don't think I mentioned was when you first roll this out, if you do an enforce and you made a mistake, all of a sudden you might impact your users. You know, obviously you don't want to impact your users, so we can do what's called put it into audit mode. So that's one of the rules, or one of the things we can do. So coming into AppLocker, we want to configure rule enforcement. I can say configure these to enforce them, or I can audit. Now in my demo here, I want to enforce the rules to show folks that I can control what's happening. If I'd left in audit mode, what would happen is you'd go into event logs and say this command was allowed to run, but if you would have had enforcement on there, it would have been blocked. And that's where I was talking about Windows event forwarding. It'd be an event you could see, oh, that's 8,025. So I'm going to take that value and I'm going to ship it back. So I'm sorry, I don't remember the event ID for it. So it's probably not 8,025. All right, so now let's go look at each of the rules. I'm gonna look at the script rules just for an example. So these are default rules that Microsoft, if I click on here, it'll automatically, or it'll create default rules for me, which is what these are. And to really lock it down, when you read some of the defined instructions, it's going to say don't create the default rules, use these guidelines. But this is a good starting point, and you can go back and you can modify this to get exactly what you need. So I did that for this demo, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to go into the properties of this and kind of give you an idea of what happens. So it's relatively simple. As you can see, I right-clicked on script rules. I said create the default rules, which is what I did before earlier. And as you can see on here, I'm doing an allow, and I'm allowing all scripts for built-in administrators. And I've defined exceptions in here, and even blocking administrators from these locations. And again, this was just an example. This really wouldn't be where I would define it against the built-in administrators group, but I wanted to show you something.
Can I get you to click on path for a second?
You bet.
At the top, there you go.
Okay, so there's 3 different types of rules that can be created. You can create a path rule, you can create a publisher rule, or you can create a path publisher and hash. So with
Okay.
the path rule, I can define, okay, this is the path that I'm allowing you to run or not allowing you to run. And so that's what this one means. So in this instance, this path, I'm allowing all scripts to be run because I'm an administrator. And then I'm just having these exceptions. These are the exceptions I don't want an administrator to run, is what that is. So if I looked for a default rule for scripts in the program files folder, I'm allowing everyone, and everyone I'm allowing default for the Windows directory. So I'm allowing the directory for everyone, and I'm allowing the program files for everyone. So if somebody tries to run a script as a user outside of the administrators for a path, like if you remember earlier, I had that C:\users / and that red folder. I've gone into AppLocker and I said you can no longer run those in those locations. All right, so now I'm back to my initial group policy screen, and I'm going to then enable the policy I just showed you. So we're going to drag this up to where my workstation is, and it's saying, do I want to link this policy to this organizational unit? I'm going to say yes. So now it's linked, and by default, it can take 90 minutes or more. You know, it's 90 minutes plus a 30-minute, 1 to 30-minute range before that policy will be applied against a client. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to force that update on my client in here. So I'm going to bring that back up. If you remember this demo we had, I'm going to bring in my command prompt, and I left it in here so I could not make have a typo. So we're going to update the computer policy. So it's going to go out and it's going to grab that new policy and apply it against this machine. So now it's been successfully completed. So let's go back to our Outlook and double click on our Excel document again. And if you remember, it's going to say, hey, you need to enable if you want to make any changes. So I think, okay, great. You know, this is my VP that sent it to me. I'm sure nobody would pretend that wasn't the VP. Click on enable, and you can quickly see on there, boom, this has been blocked. Now I can go into event logs. We'd like to see the event log and just see the message that showed that it was blocked.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that would be great.
Okay, let me go into event logs, event tools, event viewer, and we're going to go to the AppLocker event log. Let me move this over a little bit, and that was a script. And you can see from here, the ransomware command was prevented from running. And then when I was talking, I guess it's 8007, I could take that 8007 and I could ship it off, so then I could be warned, hey, somebody's trying to run something that shouldn't have been tried to run. Maybe this computer's been infected, but the payload's been leveled. It's sitting on there waiting to be executed, but it hasn't run. So this, you know, free is pretty darn great tool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is neat, and I'm surprised that a lot more people don't actually use it. It seems like it would be fairly easy to configure, and the benefits, you know, seem like they would be huge, especially in today's ransomware, you know, attack vector world.
Yep, we're actually, when we finish the POP AppLocker, we're working on some more tools, and one of them is going to be focused around ransomware, which is going to build an AppLocker, Emmet, and some other tools, dashboards. We're really hoping. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen right now. There's just talk, and we would like to try to get something like that out there. But this is here, and this is now. AppLocker is available, and like I said, POP AppLocker is coming out, and we can help you.
So is there a place that users can go to get some more information?
Yeah, you bet. If you look down below on the screen, there should be a link for an overview, and that would be a good starting point for the folks. That would definitely get them started to find out more information.
Okay. All right. That sounds great. Well, listen, Paul, I want to thank you for being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you. This is really fun. This is entertaining for me.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun for us, too. And I guess that's all we've got today. So that's your taste of Premiere.